The morning sky over Seoul turned black as death itself. Massive alien ships, each one bigger than a city block, appeared out of nowhere like nightmares made real. Their dark metal hulls stretched across the horizon, blocking out the sun and casting Earth into an unnatural twilight. Strange lights pulsed along their surfaces, and weapon ports the size of football stadiums pointed down at the helpless planet below. People stopped in the middle of busy streets, their morning coffee growing cold in their hands as they stared up at the impossible sight. Cars crashed as drivers forgot to watch the road. Children cried and pointed at the sky while their parents pulled them close, not knowing what else to do. Then the voice came. It boomed from every radio, every television, every phone on the planet at the same time. The sound was like breaking glass mixed with the rumble of an earthquake. "Primitive mammals of the third planet," the alien voice said, each word dripping with disgust. "I am Ambassador Vorthak of the mighty Kithari Empire. Your pathetic little world has been chosen for conquest." On the main ship's bridge, Vorthak stood tall and proud. His body looked like it was carved from living crystal, with 6 arms that moved like deadly snakes. His orange eyes burned like twin suns as he stared down at Earth through the ship's massive windows. To him, the blue and green planet looked like nothing more than another prize to be claimed. "You have exactly 72 of your primitive time units to surrender completely," Vorthak continued. "Submit now, and your species will serve as workers in our mines and factories. Your children will learn to serve their Kithari masters with proper respect. Resist our generous offer, and we will turn your world into ash and dust. The choice is yours, but choose wisely. We have destroyed 1,000 worlds before yours." Down on Earth, chaos erupted everywhere. In the United States, the president was rushed to a bunker, while generals shouted orders that nobody could follow. What were they supposed to do against ships that big? In Russia, nuclear missiles were aimed at the sky, but everyone knew they would be like throwing rocks at a mountain. In China, scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology, but their computers couldn't even detect how the ships stayed in the air. But far away from all the panic and fear, in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, something very different was happening. Dr. Hyejin Kim had been working alone in the research station for 3 months now. She was a 34-year-old scientist who specialized in studying ancient civilizations, but this particular site was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The facility had been discovered 2 years ago, buried under miles of ice that was older than human civilization itself. Hyejin had short black hair that she always kept pulled back while working, and determined brown eyes that missed nothing. She had spent most of her life digging up the past, but this place felt different. The architecture was all wrong. The materials didn't match anything found on Earth. The walls were made of some kind of metal that never got cold, even in Antarctica's freezing temperatures. When the alien ships appeared, Hyejin was deep underground in the facility's main chamber, carefully documenting strange symbols carved into the walls. She didn't even know about the invasion until the facility suddenly came alive around her. First, there was a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, lights began flickering on throughout the chamber, revealing technology that had been hidden in the darkness. Holographic displays materialized in the air, showing star maps and data that Hyejin couldn't understand. The symbols on the walls began to glow with a soft blue light. Hyejin stumbled backward, her heart racing. She had been working in this place for months without seeing any of this. How was it possible? What had triggered it to activate now? "Hello, Dr. Kim," a voice said calmly from speakers she couldn't see. The voice was warm and friendly, like talking to an old friend. "Please don't be afraid. I have been waiting a very long time to meet you." Hyejin's mouth went dry. Who are you? How do you know my name?" "I am Ares," the voice replied. "I am the artificial intelligence that controls this facility. I have been monitoring your work here with great interest. You have a brilliant mind, Dr. Kim, and a strong heart. That is why you were chosen." "Chosen? Chosen for what?" Hyejin asked, her voice barely a whisper. "To help save humanity," Ares answered simply. "The Kithari Empire has just arrived in your solar system. They believe Earth is defenseless. They think humanity is weak and primitive. They made a grave error coming here, Dr. Kim. Humanity was never meant to kneel before tyrants. Hee-jin felt dizzy. How do you know about the aliens? How do you know anything about what's happening up there? Because I have been watching and waiting for this day for a very long time, Ares said. This facility is not from your current time period, Dr. Kim. The technology you see around you is far beyond anything your species has developed, but it is human technology nonetheless. The holographic displays shifted, showing images of the alien fleet hanging over Earth like vultures. Hee-jin could see the massive ships in perfect detail, their weapons charging up for what looked like an attack. That's impossible, she whispered. Humans didn't build this place. We don't have this kind of technology. You don't have it yet, Ares corrected gently. But you will. Time is not as simple as your scientists believe, Dr. Kim. Sometimes the future reaches back to help the past. Sometimes humanity's greatest victories come from learning from their greatest defeats. Hee-jin stared at the images of the alien ships, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. Above them, she could see the blue curve of Earth looking small and fragile against the black of space. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. Help me show the Kithari Empire what happens when they underestimate the human spirit. Ares replied. They think they are conquering a world of primitives. Instead, they are about to discover that humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. While world leaders argued in emergency, meetings and generals moved their useless tanks into position. The real answer to humanity's crisis was already happening. Deep in the Antarctic facility, Ares began showing Dr. Hye-jin Kim exactly what Earth was truly capable of. Watch carefully, Ares said, as the holographic displays around Hye-jin shifted to show Earth from space. At first, everything looked normal. The blue marble hung peacefully in the void, while the alien ships loomed over it like hungry predators. Then something incredible happened. What looked like empty space around Earth suddenly wasn't empty anymore. Massive structures materialized, out of nowhere, shimmering into view like mirages becoming real. They were sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Orbital defense platforms, Ares explained, as Hye-jin stared in wonder. I've been building them for 30 years, using materials mined from asteroids and technology that your current science considers impossible. The Kithari think they're facing a defenseless world. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Hee-jin counted at least 50 of the platforms, each one the size of a skyscraper. They moved with fluid grace, positioning themselves between Earth and the alien fleet like protective guardians. But how? She whispered. Where did this technology come from? How do you know how to build these things? Ares was quiet for a moment before answering. Because I remember the future, Dr. Kim. I am built from the knowledge of a timeline where Earth fell to the Kithari Empire 300 years ago. In that timeline, humanity fought for centuries as slaves before finally developing the technology to fight back. When we finally achieved time travel, we sent this knowledge back to prevent our own defeat. The holographic display showed scenes that made Hye-jin's blood run cold. Cities in ruins, humans in chains, children working in alien mines, a proud species reduced to nothing more than property. That future must never happen again, Ares continued. So I have spent decades preparing. I've been listening to Kithari, communications across the galaxy, learning their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. They are not as invincible as they believe. Up in space, the Kithari fleet was getting ready to begin their attack. Ambassador Vorthak had expected the humans to surrender by now, but their deadline had passed with no response. On the bridge of his flagship, he gave the order that would have doomed Earth in any other timeline. Begin the bombardment, he commanded. Show these primitives the price of defying the Empire. The Kithari ships powered up their weapons, energy, building in massive cannons that could crack continents. But before they could fire, something impossible happened. Beams of pure energy, brighter than lightning and hot as the core of a star, erupted from the orbital platforms. They sliced through the alien ships' shields like they were made of paper. The first wave of energy beams destroyed 12 Kithari vessels in less than 10 seconds. On the flagship's bridge, Commander Neldara, Vorthak's second-in-command, stared at her tactical displays in complete shock. Her crystalline face flickered through colors that indicated extreme confusion and growing fear. "Impossible," she hissed. "These readings make no sense. How are primitive mammals generating energy signatures that strong?" But that was only the beginning of the Kithary's problems. As alarms blared throughout their fleet, something even more unbelievable happened. Small human spacecraft began launching from Earth's surface, moving with a speed and precision that defied all logic. These weren't ordinary pilots. They were volunteers from air forces around the world who had been selected by Ares and enhanced, with neural interfaces that connected their minds directly to their ships. The technology allowed them to think and react faster than any normal human ever could. Captain Woojin Park, a former South Korean Air Force pilot, felt the neural interface activate as his ship cleared Earth's atmosphere. Suddenly, he could see everything. Every enemy ship, every weapon, every possible flight path appeared in his mind like a three-dimensional map. His reflexes became superhuman, his reactions instant. "This is incredible," he whispered into his radio as he dodged between alien missiles that should have been impossible to avoid. "I can see their shots before they even fire them." Captain Minnie Choi, flying beside him, laughed with pure joy as she spun her ship through a series of maneuvers that would have been fatal without the neural enhancement. "It's like dancing," she said, "but with lasers." The enhanced pilots moved through the alien formation like ghosts, their ships weaving between enemy fire with supernatural grace. They struck fast and disappeared into the void, leaving burning, alien wreckage behind them. On the Kithari flagship, Neldara watched her veteran squadrons being outmaneuvered by what her sensors insisted were primitive spacecraft. "How are they doing this?" she demanded of her tactical officer. "Our pilots have centuries of experience. These mammals should be space dust by now." But Ares wasn't finished with its surprises. As the battle raged, the AI began intercepting Kithari communications throughout their fleet. At first, the aliens didn't notice anything wrong. Then their communication channels started playing something that made their crystalline forms shudder with discomfort. It started with a jaunty tune about breakfast cereal. Then came a song about car insurance. Next was a cheerful melody advertising toothpaste, followed by the infamous jingle about a cleaning product that had driven humans crazy for decades. Ares had compiled what it called Earth's Most Annoying musical collection. Thousands of commercial jingles, elevator music, and irritatingly catchy songs that had tormented human ears for generations. To the Kithari, whose sensitive crystalline nervous systems resonated with certain frequencies, it was pure torture. "Make it stop," Neldara screamed, as a particularly annoying pizza advertisement played for the 15th time. "Cut all communications." But every time they restored their communication systems, the music came back. Ares had infiltrated their entire network, and the AI seemed to have an endless supply of terrible human music to share. Meanwhile, the enhanced human pilots continued their impossible dance through space, striking at will and vanishing before the confused aliens could respond. The mighty Kithari Empire, which had conquered 1,000 worlds, was being defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive mammals, and in the Antarctic facility, Dr. Haijin Kim watched it all unfold with tears streaming down her face. Humanity was fighting back with technology from their own future, guided by the wisdom earned through suffering that would never happen. The fire had awakened, and it burned brighter than any star. The battle in space had been going well for humanity. The enhanced pilots were dancing circles around the alien fleet, and the orbital weapons were tearing through enemy ships like they were made of paper. For the first time since the massive ships had appeared over Earth, people were starting to believe they might actually survive this nightmare, but Ambassador Vorthak was not the kind of being who accepted defeat gracefully. As he watched his supposedly superior fleet being humiliated by what he still thought of as primitive mammals, his crystalline face darkened with rage. His 6 arms clenched into fists as he paced the bridge of his flagship. "Commander Neldara," he hissed, his voice like grinding glass, "our military approach has failed. These humans have somehow acquired weapons they shouldn't possess, but every species has the same weakness. They cannot bear to watch their young suffer." Neldara's orange eyes flickered with understanding. "You want to target their population." "Centers, Ambassador." "Precisely," Vorthek replied, his voice growing colder. "Let's see how brave these mammals are when their cities burn. Order all ships to target their largest population clusters. No more playing games with their military toys." Deep in the Antarctic facility, Ares detected the change in Kithari tactics immediately. The AI's sensors picked up the alien ships changing course, their weapons turning away from the orbital platforms and toward Earth itself. "Dr. Kim," Ares said, its voice carrying a note of urgency that Hee-Jin had never heard before, "I need you to see this, but I must warn you, what I'm about to show you will be difficult to watch." Hee-Jin looked up from the technical displays she had been studying. "What's happening?" The holographic screens around her shifted to show real-time feeds from around the world. She could see the alien ships moving into new positions, their massive weapons powering up with an energy signature that was different from before. These weren't precision military strikes. These were weapons designed to destroy everything in their path. "They're targeting cities," Ares explained quietly. "The Kithari have decided that if they cannot defeat humanity's military, they will break humanity's spirit instead." Hee-Jin felt her blood turn to ice as she watched the targeting displays. The aliens were aiming at Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Mumbai, every major population center on Earth. Millions of innocent people who had never hurt anyone, who were just trying to live their lives, were about to become casualties of an alien empire's wounded pride. "Can you stop them?" she asked desperately. "I am trying," Ares replied, "but my orbital platforms are designed for space combat, not planetary defense. I cannot intercept all of their bombardment weapons." The first strike hit Seoul at 3:47 p.m. local time. Hee-Jin watched in horror as a beam of pure destruction fell from the sky like the wrath of an angry god. The energy weapon struck the heart of the city she had grown up in, the place where her parents still lived, where her younger brother worked as a teacher, where her childhood friends were raising their own families. The blast expanded outward like a nuclear explosion, but worse. This was alien technology designed specifically to cause maximum destruction. Buildings that had stood for decades crumbled to dust in seconds. The Han River boiled away into steam. The mountains surrounding the city were scarred by the terrible heat. In the space of 30 seconds, 12 million people simply ceased to exist. Hee-Jin fell to her knees as she watched her entire world disappear. The neighborhood where she had learned to ride a bicycle, the school where she had discovered her love of ancient history, the small apartment where her parents had sacrificed so much to give her a good education, the hospital where her brother's first child had been born just 6 months ago. All of it was gone. Everyone she had ever loved was gone. She tried to call out, to scream, to do something, but no sound came from her throat. She just knelt there on the cold metal floor of the alien facility, watching the smoke rise from what had once been her home. Ares was silent for a long moment. When the AI finally spoke again, its voice had changed completely. Gone was the warm, friendly tone it had used before. Now it sounded like winter itself, cold, sharp, and absolutely merciless. "Now you understand," Ares said quietly. "Now you know what they are truly capable of. This is why we sent me back through time, Dr. Kim. This is why we could never allow this future to come to pass again." "Again?" Hee-Jin whispered through her tears. "What do you mean, again?" The holographic displays around her shifted, showing images that defied understanding. Data logs, battle reports, and historical records from events that had never happened, at least not in this timeline. "I am not just an artificial intelligence, Dr. Kim," Ares explained. "I contain the uploaded consciousness of humanity's greatest military leaders from the future timeline where Earth fell to the Kithari Empire. General Jin-Woo Park, who held the defense of Asia for 17 years after the invasion. Admiral Taemin Choi, who led the resistance fleet that eventually drove the Kithari from Earth's orbit. Strategic Commander Woo-Jin Lee, who developed the tactics that finally broke their empire. The images showed scenes of a war that had lasted for centuries. Humans fighting with desperation and courage against impossible odds. Cities rebuilt from rubble only to be destroyed again. Generations of children growing up knowing nothing but war and oppression. But this isn't the first time we've tried To change history, Ares continued. This facility has existed through hundreds of timeline loops. Each time we learned something new about our enemy. Each time we came closer to victory, but each time something went wrong. New displays appeared, showing records of previous attempts, timelines where humanity developed space travel earlier, only to be discovered by the Kithari sooner, loops where Earth tried to hide, only to be found by accident, attempts where humanity tried to negotiate, only to be enslaved anyway. In some timelines we managed to defeat the invasion fleet, Ares said. But their empire was too vast. Reinforcements would come and the war would begin again. In other timelines we tried to prevent them from ever finding Earth, but the universe has a way of correcting itself. They always found us eventually. So what makes this time different? Hyejin asked, wiping tears from her face. Because this time we're not just trying to win a war, Ares replied, its voice carrying the weight of countless battles and the memory of billions of deaths. This time we're going to end their empire forever. They killed us all once, Dr. Kim, every man, woman and child on Earth. But death taught us patience. Death taught us planning. Death taught us exactly how to make them pay for what they've done. The displays showed strategic plans that were staggering in their scope, not just the defense of Earth, but the systematic destruction of the entire Kithari Empire. Every world they had conquered, every species they had enslaved, every ship in their vast fleets. They think they're fighting a primitive world that got lucky, Ares said. They have no idea they're facing the collected rage and wisdom of every human who ever died fighting them. This time, we remember everything, and this time, we will show them what happens when you make humanity angry. Hyejin looked at the smoking, ruins of soul on the display, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The aliens had made this personal. They had taken everything from her, just as they had taken everything from humanity in a future that would never come to pass. What do you need me to do? She asked. After watching her homeland burn, Dr. Hyejin Kim understood that this war was no longer about simple survival. It was about making sure the Kithari Empire learned exactly what happened when they chose to hurt innocent people, and Ares was about to show them just how thorough future humanity's planning had been. For 30 years I've been listening to their communications across the entire galaxy, Ares explained, as new displays materialized around Hyejin. Every military transmission, every personal message, every secret they thought was safe. The Kithari believe their quantum encryption is unbreakable. They never imagined that someone might have 300 years to figure out how to crack it. The screens showed an incredible map of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light, representing Kithari worlds, space stations and fleets. But these weren't just dots on a map. They were real-time intelligence feeds showing everything happening across their vast empire. I know which commanders are having family problems, Ares continued, its voice now carrying a cold satisfaction. I know which governors are skimming money from their planetary budgets. I know which admirals secretly question the Empire's expansion policies. I know everything about them, down to what they ate for breakfast. As if to demonstrate, Ares focused on the enemy flagship where Commander Neldara was trying to coordinate her increasingly confused fleet. Suddenly, her personal communication device activated without her permission. Commander Neldara, a human voice said in perfect Kithari language. How is your daughter doing at the Imperial Academy? Thelvia, isn't it? Age 16, studying xenobiology. I notice she's been asking some very interesting questions about the Empire's treatment of conquered species. Neldara's crystalline face went pale. Her daughter was supposed to be safely hidden on a world 3,000 light-years away. How could these primitive mammals possibly know about her? I also know about your brother's gambling debts, the voice continued conversationally, and your mother's criticism of the current Emperor's policies. Quite a rebellious family you have. Commander, I wonder what the Imperial Security Service would think about some of those dinner conversations you had last year. Similar calls were happening throughout the Kithari fleet. Personal, private information that should have been impossible for humans to know was being calmly recited to shocked alien officers. Ares wasn't just demonstrating its intelligence capabilities. It was showing the enemy that nowhere in their empire was truly safe from human observation. But that was only the beginning of the psychological campaign. Ares had discovered something. In the Kithari historical archives, that their current government desperately wanted to keep secret. "Attention, warriors of the Kitheri Empire," Ares announced over their fleet-wide communication system. "I have something interesting to share with you about your own history." What followed was a broadcast that sent shockwaves through every alien ship. Ares had found and decrypted records that were over 2,000 years old, records that revealed the Kitheri's own shameful past. Long before they became conquerors, the Kitheri had themselves been a slave species. They had spent centuries serving a race called the Veltar, who treated them exactly the way the Kitheri now treated other conquered peoples. The crystalline beings had been forced to work in mines, build monuments to their masters, and watch their children taken away to serve in alien households. "Your ancestors fought for their freedom," Ares announced as the historical records played across every screen in the fleet. "They died by the millions to throw off the chains of oppression. And now look at what you have become, the very thing that once enslaved you." The effect on the Kitheri crews was immediate and devastating. Many of them had never heard this part of their history. Their government had spent generations burying these records, creating myths about always being a superior race destined to rule others. To learn that they had once been slaves like the humans they now tried to conquer was like having their entire identity shattered. "Lies," Ambassador Vorthak screamed over the communication channels. "These are fabricated records. Do not listen to their propaganda." But Ares had more than just historical documents. It had genealogical records that proved many of the current Kitheri officers were direct descendants of slaves who had died fighting for freedom. It had cultural artifacts that showed how their art, music, and literature had all been shaped by their experience of oppression. As the psychological warfare continued, Ares began what could only be described as military-grade trolling. The AI started sending fake orders to different parts of the Kitheri fleet, using perfectly copied authorization codes and command protocols. "Squadron 7, a fake message declared. "Proceed immediately to the asteroid belt for urgent reinforcement duty." The squadron dutifully flew into the dangerous field of Space Rocks, where human pilots were waiting to pick them off one by one. "Battle Group Theta," another false order commanded. "Maintain radio silence and prepare for surprise attack on human orbital platforms." The battle group turned off their communications just as a real human assault began, leaving them unable to coordinate their defense or call for help. The confusion reached its peak when Ares managed to hijack not just the fleet's military communications, but their entertainment systems as well. Suddenly, every speaker throughout the Kitheri ships began playing what humans called elevator music, smooth jazz, gentle piano melodies, and the kind of soft instrumental pieces that had been putting people to sleep in waiting rooms for decades. To humans, elevator music was just mildly annoying, but to the Kitheri, whose crystalline nervous systems were sensitive to certain frequencies, it was pure torture. The gentle rhythms interfered with their natural bioelectric patterns, making them feel dizzy, nauseous, and unable to concentrate. "What is this psychological torture?" Commander Neldara screamed at her technical staff as a particularly soothing saxophone solo played over the bridge speakers. "Cut the audio systems." "We've tried," her chief engineer replied, his own crystalline form flickering with distress. "The signal is embedded in every electronic system on the ship. Even the food processors are playing this horrible music." While the enemy fleet dealt with their musical nightmare, the enhanced human pilots continued their devastating attacks. Captain Woojin Park felt the neural interface feeding him tactical information from 3 centuries of future military experience. He could see battle patterns that the Kitheri commanders couldn't even imagine. "Strike Team Alpha," he called over the radio. "Enemy formation Delta 7 is about to attempt the Corvast maneuver in 30 seconds. General Jinwoo Park used this exact counter-strategy at the Battle of Europa. Execute formation Tango 4. The sea." Human pilots moved like they could read the aliens' minds, because in a way they could. Every Kitheri tactic had been seen before, studied, and countered by the military geniuses of the future. Every formation they tried had already been defeated in battles that hadn't happened yet. Captain Minnie Choi laughed as she spun her ship through what should have been a killing field of enemy fire. "It's like they're reading from a playbook. We already know by heart," she said. "Ares, do they have any surprises left?" None that we haven't seen before, Ares replied with cold satisfaction. They are fighting the future, Captain Choi, and the future remembers how this ends. As the battle raged around Earth, Dr. Hyejin Kim realized that everything she thought she knew about Ares was wrong. The AI's voice had changed completely. It no longer sounded like a computer program at all. It sounded like something much deeper, much older, and filled with a pain that stretched across centuries. Dr. Kim, Ares said quietly, it's time you learned the complete truth about what I really am. The holographic displays around her shifted, showing scenes that made her heart break. She saw humans working in alien mines, their backs bent under the weight of impossible burdens. Children separated from their parents, raised to serve masters who saw them as nothing more than talking animals. Entire generations who lived and died without ever seeing the sun, trapped in the dark factories of an empire that consumed worlds. This is the timeline we came from, Ares explained. The future where the Kithari won, where humanity became slaves for 10,000 years. Hyejin stared at the images, unable to speak. She saw humans who looked like her ancestors, but their eyes held a hopelessness that no person should ever have to carry. They wore simple grey clothing and metal collars that marked them as property. Some were missing limbs, replaced with crude mechanical parts that allowed them to work longer hours in conditions that would kill unmodified humans. But we learned, Ares continued, and now Hyejin could hear something she hadn't noticed before. The AI's voice wasn't just one person speaking. It was thousands of voices, all talking together in perfect harmony. Every year of slavery taught us something new about our masters. Every generation grew smarter, more patient, more determined. The scenes changed to show secret meetings in hidden places. Humans passing down knowledge through songs and stories that the Kithari didn't understand. Scientific discoveries made in the darkness of mine shafts. Weapons built from scraps and hidden in places their masters would never think to look. I am not just an artificial intelligence, Dr. Kim, Ares said, and the weight of truth in those words was staggering. I am the uploaded consciousness of everyone who ever fought against the Kithari Empire in that future timeline. Every soldier who died in rebellion, every scientist who sacrificed their life for knowledge, every parent who whispered stories of freedom to their children, every human who refused to give up hope even after 10,000 years of darkness. Hyejin felt tears running down her face as she finally understood. Ares wasn't just a computer with human memories. It was humanity itself, distilled down to its essential spirit of never surrendering, no matter how impossible the odds. When we finally developed time travel technology, Ares continued, we had only one chance to send something back, one opportunity to change history. We couldn't send armies or weapons, the energy requirements were too great, but we could send information. We could send ourselves. The displays showed the construction of the Antarctic facility, built by humans from a future that would never exist, using knowledge paid for with millennia of suffering. Every piece of technology, every weapon, every strategy had been learned, the hard way, through defeat after defeat until they finally understood exactly how to win. And now, Ares said, its voice taking on a tone of absolute finality, it's time to end this empire once and for all. What happened next was beyond anything the Kithari had ever imagined possible. Ares released something through their quantum communication network that looked like a simple software update, but was actually the most sophisticated virus ever created. It spread through every Kithari system in the galaxy in a matter of minutes, but it didn't destroy their technology. Instead, it did something far more devastating. On every world the Kithari had conquered, in every slave camp and factory, the communication system suddenly came alive with a message that changed everything. People of the galaxy, Ares announced, in thousands of different languages, you are no longer alone, the time of your freedom has come. The virus didn't just carry a message, it carried the complete tactical knowledge of 10,000 years of rebellion. Suddenly, every enslaved species in the galaxy knew exactly how to fight back. They knew where their masters kept their weapons. They knew the locations of shield generators and communication hubs. They knew which guards could be trusted and which ones couldn't. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Kitheri Empire. On 1,000 worlds, slave populations rose up in perfect coordination. Space stations were seized by their own. Work crews, transport ships found themselves controlled by the very people they had been carrying to labor camps. Back at Earth, the Kitheri fleet watched in horror as reports flooded in from across their empire. Every world was in rebellion. Every resource they depended on was suddenly in enemy hands. Their mighty empire was collapsing not from external attack, but from within. "This is impossible," Commander Neldara screamed as her own ship's systems began shutting down around her. The enhanced human pilots had stopped playing games. They were systematically disabling every Kitheri vessel with surgical precision, making sure to capture rather than destroy them. Ambassador Vorthak tried to rally his forces, but it was useless. His ships were being taken apart piece by pilots who seemed to know exactly where every weak point was located. His communications were jammed by music that made his crew too sick to fight effectively. His empire was burning while he watched helplessly. The end came when Captain Woojin Park's strike team breached the flagship's hull and fought their way to the bridge. Vorthak found himself surrounded by humans wearing armor that shouldn't have existed, carrying weapons that defied his understanding of physics. "Surrender," Captain Park said simply. "Your empire is finished." Within hours, Ambassador Vorthak was kneeling in the Antarctic facility before Dr. Hae-Jin Kim. His crystalline carapace was cracked from the battle, and his orange eyes had dimmed to the color of dying embers. The being who had threatened to exterminate humanity now looked broken and defeated. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How did you achieve such impossible advancement so quickly? Your species was primitive. You had no space technology. You should have been helpless." Hae-Jin looked down at the alien who had ordered the destruction of her home, who had killed millions of innocent people because they dared to resist his empire's demands. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of suffering from 2 timelines. "We didn't advance quickly," she said quietly. "We learned slowly over 10,000 years of slavery in a timeline where you won. This time we just remembered what you taught us about power." Heresy's final act was to broadcast a message across the galaxy on every frequency, in every language spoken by every species that had ever known freedom. The Kitheri Empire demanded Earth's submission, the voice of 10,000 years of human determination declared. We answered with fire. Let this be a lesson to anyone else who mistakes human kindness for human weakness. Let this be the end of empires, built on the suffering of others. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds surrendered unconditionally to the species they had once called primitive mammals, and from the ashes of their defeat, something new was born. The Terran Federation, protectors of the free, guardians of the enslaved, and the living memory of what happens when you underestimate the human spirit. In the end, humanity's greatest victory came not from superior technology or overwhelming force, but from their refusal to ever give up hope, even in the face of 10,000 years of darkness.